So last month we talked about the dial on your camera and the automatic settings that are offered to you. But what we want to do is move away from having the camera do the choosing based on an educated guess. If you're taking a picture of a kid, you put it on the kid. If you're taking a picture of a sporting event, and the camera making some logical assumptions, to you making the choices. And we want to use those M, A, and S settings, or manual, aperture, and shutter settings, because then you can make choices and you can be creative. So we want to look more at how does a camera work? What is it doing, so that then we can use appropriate settings to get the picture that we imagine or what we want the picture to look like. So we want to look at how the camera is actually working. So you have your object and the light is hitting that object, and that light has to travel through the camera body, through the lens. It goes through the aperture and through the shutter and hits the sensor. And we want to be able to control the amount of light hitting that sensor, because we don't want a completely dark picture if there's not enough light hitting that sensor, or we don't want what's called a completely blown out picture where it's all white. We want a properly exposed picture. Exposure just meaning that the right amount of light is hitting the sensor, or what used to be film. Now we can be creative about it. We might want there to be some strong dark shadows and some bright highlights, and understanding what's going on in the camera and what controls that lets us do that. We can control light in three ways. We can control it through changing the aperture, we can do it through changing the ISO, and we can do it through changing the shutter. And by changing each of these things, we are going to have control over different things. And today I want to talk about aperture, or shooting in the A mode. If you put your camera in A mode, you are going to be able to choose the aperture setting. So today we're going to talk about what the aperture is, what it does, what it controls, and what it allows you to do creatively. So today we're going to shoot in aperture priority mode, or A. Think of your aperture like your eyeball. It is going to open and close depending on the light levels. So like your pupil, if you go out in the sunlight, your pupil shrinks down, right? Because there's so much light. Or if you go into a dark room, your pupil expands to let in light. The aperture on a camera works the same way. It gets bigger and smaller, and you can control how much light is getting into your camera by adjusting the aperture. Apertures are measured in what's called f-stops. So the larger the number, the smaller the hole, so the less light is getting in. The smaller the number, the bigger the aperture, or the larger the hole, so the more light is getting in. We're going to talk about light getting into the camera, but right now we're not going to worry about that in particular. What we're going to look at is what the aperture does as far as what your picture looks like for depth of field, because when you are shooting in A mode, you're choosing your aperture, and the camera is going to adjust your shutter speed and adjust your ISO to get the correct exposure, to get the right amount of light. So when you choose your aperture, what you're doing is you are trying to decide what's going to be in focus, because aperture controls what's in focus. So for example, if you choose a low aperture, well, a low number, you're not going to have a lot of depth of field. Depth of field means what's in focus. So if you look at the mountains in the background of the picture, you'll see that as the number goes up, more and more comes into focus. So depth of field just simply means what's in focus in your picture. So for example, somebody gave me these nutcrackers for Christmas. I put them on a table. I make the decision, okay, I only want the front nutcracker to be in focus. I want everything else to be blurry. Okay, so I want what's called a shallow depth of field. You can see here I took some cans. What if I only wanted you to be able to read the front can? Shallow depth of field. What if you wanted a long depth of field or a great depth of field? Usually this happens like if you were taking pictures of nature and you want everything in that picture to be in focus. You want the flowers in the front and the flowers in the background and the mountains in the distance. You want a long, large depth of field. So in this picture, I'm in focus as well as the monument in the background. You go to the beach, my feet are in focus, as well as everything else in the background. So when you're shooting in A and you're choosing the aperture, if you want a blurry background or low depth of field, you choose low numbers. If you want everything to be in focus, you choose high numbers so that you get high depth of field. Again, we're shooting in A and it's going to adjust. It's going to adjust your shutter and it's going to adjust your ISO so that the exposure is correct. What you're choosing is depth of field. Okay, we're simplifying this step by step by step. So today we're talking about depth of field. Depth of field only. So this month, what I would really like you to focus on is controlling your depth of field by shooting in priority A or shooting in the aperture mode. Take a picture with a low number and watch the background fall out of focus. Take a picture in choosing a high number and watch everything come into focus. So side note, this picture was actually taken with an iPhone. If you have an iPhone, it's going to prioritize high numbers because it can't make that artistic decision for you, right? It can't say, oh, well, we know that she wants everything to be in focus, or we know that she wants the background to be blurry. So most of the time, if you're looking at pictures taken with a phone, everything's in focus. It has a very high aperture number because it wants to make sure that it's not missing something that you wanted to be in focus. So if you have a camera, you get the ability to choose the different depths of field or what's in focus.